You ever walk into your own house and feel like something isn't right? That's exactly how Ricardo Wellington felt that afternoon. The air was too quiet, the kind of silence that hides a secret. He had come home early, expecting the usual emptiness, but then he heard it, a sound that made him stop halfway up the stairs. It was laughter, his son's laughter. For a moment, he thought he was imagining it. That sound had not filled this house for months. He stood there, frozen, his heart unsure whether to believe what his ears were telling him. Slowly, he climbed the last few steps, each one heavier than the last. The laughter came again, light and innocent, echoing from Daniel's room. Ricardo's fingers trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He pushed the door slightly open, careful not to make a sound. Inside, the scene before him didn't make sense. His 5-year-old son was lying on a soft mat on the floor, smiling from ear to ear. Kneeling beside him was Elena, the family's maid, her dark hands gently moving the boy's legs. But she wasn't cleaning. She wasn't even talking about chores. She was helping him stretch, lifting one leg slowly while guiding him to hold balance. Daniel was giggling as she counted softly under her breath, her voice calm and patient. Ricardo blinked, unsure if he should shout or speak. His jaw tightened as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The maid he paid to clean the floors was touching his son like a therapist. His chest filled with confusion, anger, and shock all at once. He stepped back, pressing his back against the wall. For a long moment, he just stood there, watching. Elena had her hair tied neatly behind her head, her maid uniform spotless, black and white with a faint wrinkle near the shoulder. Her expression was focused but kind, her eyes full of care. "Good job, Daniel," she whispered. "You're getting stronger, I can feel it." The boy laughed again, lifting his small legs with visible effort, his fingers gripping a small toy car beside him for courage. Ricardo's eyes burned. He hadn't seen that smile since his wife cried in the doctor's office months ago. He quietly closed the door and stood in the hallway, breathing hard. His world felt like it had been flipped upside down. A maid helping his son? How could this be? He turned and walked slowly down the hall, his thoughts tangled. That evening, as he sat in his office surrounded by papers he couldn't read, Ricardo's mind wouldn't rest. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but it didn't calm him. All he could see was that image of Elena holding his son's fragile legs like she knew exactly what she was doing. When his wife, Sophia, entered the room, he didn't look up. "Did you know?" he asked softly. Sophia paused near the doorway. "Know what?" He lifted his eyes, a mixture of confusion and hurt in them. "About her," he said. "About the maid and what she's doing with Daniel." Sophia sighed, walking closer. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I saw them weeks ago." Ricardo's face tightened. "And you said nothing?" "She's helping him," Sophia said, her tone gentle but firm. "And it's working. Haven't you noticed he's happier?" Ricardo leaned back, his throat dry. "She's a maid, Sophia, not a therapist. She's something more than that," Sophia replied, sitting across from him. "She told me she learned how to do therapy from experience. I watched her, Ricardo. She's careful, patient, and Daniel trusts her." Ricardo ran his fingers through his hair, his voice breaking. "You should have told me." Sophia looked at him sadly. "You wouldn't have listened. You barely look at Daniel anymore." The words cut deep. Ricardo turned his head away, staring at the dark window where his reflection looked older than he remembered. "I've been trying," he whispered. "Trying isn't enough," Sophia said softly. "That woman did what no doctor could do. She made our son laugh again." The house fell quiet. Only the faint sound of rain tapping the windows filled the room. Ricardo didn't reply. He sat there for a long time after Sophia left, staring at nothing. Later that night, when the lights in the house went out, he found himself standing in front of Daniel's room again. The door was slightly open. Inside, the boy was asleep, his blanket half covering his small legs. On the bedside table was a small notebook with handwriting that wasn't his son's. Ricardo picked it up carefully. It was filled with notes, detailed, neat handwriting describing Daniel's daily progress. Day 12. Daniel lifted his right leg by himself for 5 seconds, smiled after exercise. Day 17. Tried walking between furniture, fell twice but laughed. Day 23. Said he wants to run someday. Ricardo's eyes watered as he read. He closed the notebook slowly, his fingers trembling. He didn't know whether to feel angry or grateful. The maid had gone beyond her job, but she had also done something incredible. He walked to the window and looked outside. The night air felt heavy, but something inside him was changing, even if he couldn't admit it yet. The next morning, Ricardo left for work earlier than usual. He couldn't look Elena in the eye. She greeted him politely near the door, but he just nodded and walked past. Her calm smile didn't fade, but her eyes noticed his tension. All day, he couldn't focus. The image of her helping Daniel kept coming back. The sound of laughter haunted him. That night, he didn't go straight home. He drove around the city aimlessly, parking near the park where he once took Daniel years ago. He remembered his little boy holding his hand, asking, "Dad, will I ever run like the other kids?" Ricardo had said yes that day, but deep down he hadn't believed it. Now, he wasn't so sure. Maybe he had been wrong. When he finally returned home, it was late. The mansion was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that holds questions. He looked up the staircase toward Daniel's room, where a faint light was still on. For a long time, he stood there, staring, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was certain. The woman he thought was just a maid had shaken something deep inside him, and he couldn't rest until he found out who she really was. The next morning began earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen when Ricardo stood by the balcony window, holding a cup of black coffee that had already gone cold. His eyes were fixed on the front yard where Elena was walking in, dressed neatly in her black and white uniform, her small bag slung over one shoulder. There was something peaceful about her, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. He watched as she greeted the gardener and smiled softly before heading inside. That calm smile unsettled him. He had been awake all night thinking of her hands guiding Daniel's legs, her soft voice, that notebook full of progress notes. A maid shouldn't know such things, he thought. But he couldn't deny what he had seen. His son had laughed. His son had moved. His son had hope again. When he came downstairs, Elena was already dusting the living room shelves. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "Good morning, sir," she said politely. Ricardo looked at her for a moment before replying. "Good morning," he said, his voice low, almost unsure. He wanted to ask about the therapy but didn't. Instead, he sat in silence at the dining table while Sophia served breakfast. The clinking of spoons filled the air. "You didn't sleep," Sophia said quietly, studying his face. "I couldn't," he answered. "I keep seeing her and Daniel." Sophia smiled faintly. "You should talk to her." Ricardo looked down at his cup. "And say what? That I'm angry because she helped my son walk? Maybe start by asking her why," Sophia said, her tone calm but firm. "You've built your company on understanding people, Ricardo. Try understanding her." The words stayed with him all day. Later that afternoon, when the mansion was quiet and Daniel was taking his nap, Ricardo found Elena in the kitchen, cleaning the counter. He stopped at the doorway, his voice steady but heavy. "Elena," he said. She turned, slightly startled. "Yes, sir?" He took a deep breath. "I want to know what you're doing with my son." Her hands froze mid-motion. "Sir?" "You heard me," he said. "Yesterday, I saw you with him. You were helping him move his legs like a therapist would. I want to know where you learned that." Elena wiped her hands on her apron and faced him fully. Her eyes were calm, but her voice trembled slightly. "I understand how it must have looked, sir. I should have asked for your permission, And I'm sorry I didn't. I only wanted to help him." "Help him?" Ricardo repeated, his tone softer but still guarded. "You're a maid, Elena. How could you possibly know how to treat a condition like his?" For a moment, silence filled the kitchen. Then she spoke slowly, each word gentle but firm. "Because I've done it before." Ricardo frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked down at her hands, then back up. "My younger brother, Miguel, was born with the same condition. The doctors said he would never walk properly. We couldn't afford therapy, so I learned. I watched, I studied, I practiced for years. Today, Miguel runs, plays soccer, even rides a bicycle." Ricardo stared at her, speechless. "I never wanted to overstep," Elena continued. "But when I saw Daniel, I saw my brother again. I couldn't just watch him struggle when I knew I could help." Ricardo swallowed hard. "And you kept this from me?" She nodded. "Yes, sir, because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. People don't usually believe someone like me." Her words hung in the air, simple but powerful. Ricardo didn't reply. He just stood there, his chest heavy with a mix of shame and confusion. She was right, he wouldn't have believed her. "May I show you something, sir?" she asked softly. He nodded. She walked to the corner of the kitchen and opened a small drawer. From it, she pulled out a worn tablet and a thick folder of handwritten papers. "These are Daniel's daily exercises and recordings," she explained. "I've been keeping track of his improvements." Ricardo stepped closer and looked at the folder. Each page had neat notes, simple drawings of leg positions, and progress updates. "You did all this?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," she said. "And the videos are on the tablet." He tapped the screen and watched. In the videos, Elena guided Daniel through small movements, encouraging him softly as he tried to lift his leg. His laughter echoed in the clips, pure and bright. Ricardo felt a lump form in his throat. When the video ended, he turned to her. "Why didn't you tell me about your background?" She looked down again. "Because I applied for a therapist job once," she said. "The hospital told me they didn't have space for someone like me. I tried other clinics, but they said I didn't fit the image they wanted. I stopped trying after a while." Ricardo's jaw tightened. "You mean because of how you look?" She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Yes, sir, and because I come from a poor family." For a long moment, Ricardo said nothing. He felt small, like the walls of his wealth were closing in around him. Finally, he exhaled. "You shouldn't have gone behind my back," he said, his tone low but softer. "But I can't deny what I've seen. My son is smiling again because of you." Elena's eyes watered. "That's all I wanted, sir." He nodded slowly. "I'll think about what to do next." As Ricardo left the kitchen, he glanced back once more. Elena was cleaning again, as if their conversation hadn't just changed everything. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Daniel's laughter and Elena's calm face. Around midnight, he made a decision. He wanted to see for himself what kind of life she lived outside his mansion. The next day, after telling Sofia he had a late meeting, Ricardo followed Elena's bus after she left work. The road led to a narrow street lined with old apartments. He parked quietly and watched as she entered a small building. A few minutes later, a teenage boy came out running, laughing, chasing a soccer ball. Ricardo's eyes widened. The boy's stride was strong and steady. When the ball rolled near his car, Ricardo stepped out and picked it up. The boy smiled and said, "Thanks, sir." Ricardo smiled back faintly. "You play well." "Yes, sir," the boy said proudly. "My sister taught me. She's the best." Ricardo's breath caught. "Your sister's name?" "Elena?" the boy replied, still smiling. Ricardo looked toward the apartment window where light spilled out softly. In that moment, everything made sense: her patience, her skill, her quiet strength. He drove home in silence that night, his heart full of thoughts he couldn't explain. The woman he thought was just a maid had lived through pain and turned it into purpose. And somehow, that purpose was now changing his family too. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. The next few days felt heavy for Ricardo. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen, about that small apartment, the boy running freely, and the quiet strength in Elena's eyes. Every word she spoke kept replaying in his head, and every laugh from Daniel now sounded like a reminder that he had been wrong about her from the start. At work, he sat through meetings without hearing a word. Charts, numbers, and reports blurred before his eyes. His assistant had to repeat questions twice. Finally, he closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, staring out the tall glass window of his office. The city stretched before him, busy, restless, and loud. Yet, for the first time in years, Ricardo didn't feel part of it. When he drove home that evening, his mansion felt different. It no longer looked like success. It looked like loneliness, built with expensive walls. He walked past the chandelier, the art pieces, the marble floors. Everything felt empty. From the hallway, he heard soft music. He stopped. The sound came from Daniel's room again. Quietly, he walked closer and peeked inside. Elena was there, sitting on the floor beside Daniel, helping him balance as he stood up. She had placed small colored blocks on the floor, and Daniel was trying to reach each one with his toes, giggling whenever he succeeded. "Good job," she said, her voice soft and warm. "You're getting better every day." Ricardo felt his throat tighten. He stood there for a long moment before stepping away, unnoticed. Something in him was changing. The next day, he decided to follow her again. But this time, not just to her house. He wanted to understand the kind of person she really was. After she left work, he kept a quiet distance as her bus moved through the city. It stopped near an old brick building at the edge of a poor neighborhood. The sign above the entrance was faded, but Ricardo could still read it. Brooklyn Community Rehab Center. Elena walked inside, carrying a large bag. Curious, Ricardo parked nearby and followed discreetly. Through the window, he saw her setting up a small room filled with children, some in wheelchairs, some wearing braces, some sitting quietly. She smiled at each one of them, calling them by name. Ricardo leaned closer, his heart pounding. He watched as Elena began working with them, one by one. She tied bright ribbons on their wrists, turned therapy into a game, and used makeshift tools, soft towels, toy cars, even spoons to guide their movements. The children laughed and clapped as she encouraged them gently. The scene hit him hard. He had never seen so much love in one place. There were no cameras, no doctors, no audience. Just a woman who had chosen to give what little she had to those who had nothing. Hours passed, and Ricardo didn't move. When she finally finished, the children hugged her before leaving. She locked up the small center, turned off the lights, and walked out into the cold night. Her steps were slow, tired, but peaceful. Ricardo sat in his car, unable to drive. The woman he had doubted was doing more good with nothing than he had ever done with millions. That night, when he returned home, Sophia was in the living room reading a book. She looked up and noticed his face. "You saw her again, didn't you?" she asked softly. Ricardo nodded, sitting beside her. "You knew, didn't you?" Sophia closed her book and smiled faintly. "I had a feeling. I saw the way Daniel looks at her. That kind of trust doesn't happen by chance." Ricardo leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I followed her to a community center," he said. "She helps children there, kids with conditions like Daniel's, for free." Sophia's eyes softened. "She has a gift, Ricardo." He nodded slowly. "She does, and I almost ruined it because of my pride." Sophia placed her hand gently on his. "You still have a chance to make it right." For the first time in years, Ricardo couldn't hold back his emotions. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, "All this time I thought money could fix everything. But it couldn't even fix my own family. Sophia smiled sadly. Money builds walls, but love builds bridges. Ricardo looked at her and nodded. Tomorrow, I'll talk to her again. The next day, he waited until Elena was done working with Daniel. She was packing her things when he entered the room quietly. She turned, slightly surprised. "Sir," she said, standing up straight. He raised his hand gently. "You don't have to call me sir," he said softly. "Just Ricardo." She looked uncertain. "Yes, Ricardo," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "I followed you yesterday," he admitted, "to the rehab center." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "I saw what you do there," he continued. "The children, the way they look at you. I've seen a lot of people with money and power, Elena, but I've never seen anyone with a heart like yours." Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly looked down. "I'm sorry if I overstepped again, sir. I mean, Ricardo, I didn't mean for you to find out that way." He shook his head. "Don't be sorry. You opened my eyes." She looked up slowly, her voice trembling. "I only wanted to help your son. He reminds me so much of my brother. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Ricardo nodded. "You did more than help him. You gave him back his joy. You gave me back my son." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt warm this time. He took a deep breath and said, "I've been thinking. You shouldn't be cleaning floors. You belong in a place where your gift can shine." Elena looked confused. "What do you mean?" Ricardo smiled slightly. "I mean you're not my maid anymore. From today, you're Daniel's full-time private therapist. And I'll pay you 5 times what you earn now." Her mouth fell open slightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Ricardo, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said gently. "Because this is only the beginning." Elena nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "Yes, sir. I mean, yes, Ricardo. Thank you." As she left the room, Ricardo stood by the window, watching Daniel sleep peacefully. The house no longer felt so cold. There was warmth again, quiet and steady, like light returning after a storm. Later that night, he opened his laptop and began typing. A letter of funding approval, a renovation plan, a new project, the Elena Miguel Institute for Child Therapy. This time, it wasn't business. It was purpose. As he hit save, Ricardo smiled for the first time in months. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that life had given him a second chance, not just to be a better father, but a better man. And soon, the world would see what true compassion could build. 3 months passed, and the mansion no longer felt like the same place. Laughter echoed through the halls again, the smell of food and sunlight filled every corner, and for the first time in years, Ricardo found himself coming home early not because of guilt, but because he wanted to. Daniel was walking now, not perfectly, but proudly. Each step was a small miracle. Elena's therapy sessions had turned into something magical: songs, games, and patience stitched together like healing hands. Even Sophia joined in sometimes, sitting by the window and smiling as her son counted each step aloud. One bright Saturday morning, Ricardo stood at the door of Daniel's room, watching silently. The little boy walked across the mat, his hands stretched toward Elena. "I can do it, Aunt Elena," he said with a grin. "Yes, you can," she replied warmly, her eyes shining. One more step. He took that step, shaky but strong, and when his foot landed, the room filled with joy. Sophia clapped, tears rolling down her cheeks, and Ricardo's throat tightened. He walked closer and knelt beside his son. "You did it," he whispered. Daniel turned, smiling proudly. "I told you I could, Dad." Ricardo pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. In that moment, years of silence and guilt melted away. When he looked up, Elena was standing near the wall, smiling softly, her hands clasped together. "You gave him back his confidence," Ricardo said quietly, "and you gave me back my hope." She shook her head gently. "He did it himself. I just helped him believe." Later that day, Ricardo gathered everyone in the living room, Sofia, Elena, and even Miguel, who had been visiting for the weekend. He cleared his throat, holding a folder in his hands. "I have something to show you," he said. Elena looked at him curiously as he placed the folder on the table. "This," he said, opening it, "is a full proposal for the new rehabilitation center. It's already approved, funded, and under construction." She blinked, confused. "A rehabilitation center?" "Yes," he said with a smile. "The Elena Miguel Institute of Child Therapy. You'll be the director." Elena gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. "Ricardo, I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you will. You've changed lives here. Now it's time to change many more." Sofia stood and hugged Elena tightly. "You deserve this," she whispered. "You've given us a miracle." Elena's tears fell freely. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Ricardo smiled. "You already did," every time Daniel laughed. Weeks later, the new center opened its doors. It stood in the heart of Brooklyn, painted in warm colors, filled with sunlight and laughter. Inside, there were rooms for therapy, play, and learning, all designed to help children who had been told no their whole lives. On the opening day, dozens of families gathered. Children in braces and wheelchairs smiled as music played softly in the background. Reporters were there, cameras flashing, but Elena stayed humble, her heart beating fast as she stood beside Ricardo and Sofia. Daniel stood at the podium, holding a small paper. He looked nervous, but Elena knelt beside him and whispered, "You've got this." He nodded, smiling up at her before turning to the crowd. "My name is Daniel," he said softly into the microphone. "When I was little, doctors said I might never walk or play. But someone didn't give up on me. She helped me believe I could. She made me laugh when I wanted to cry. Her name is Aunt Elena." The crowd clapped warmly, and Elena covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel continued, his voice trembling but strong. "Because of her, I can walk. And because of her, many kids will walk too. This place is for all the children who were told they can't. Aunt Elena showed me that it doesn't matter where you come from, only how big your heart is." Ricardo wiped his eyes as Sofia squeezed his hand. When Daniel finished, he turned to Elena and handed her a white envelope. "Dad said this is for you," he said with a proud smile. She opened it slowly, her hands shaking. Inside was a scholarship letter and a partnership contract for advanced studies and leadership at the new institute. Ricardo spoke softly from the side. "This isn't charity, Elena. It's justice. You earned this." Elena looked up at him, her lips trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me." Ricardo stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said quietly. "Thank you for teaching me what belief really means." The applause filled the room, loud and long. Miguel hugged his sister tightly, whispering, "I told you your work would change lives." As the crowd began to move, Ricardo stood near the window, watching children play outside in the courtyard. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Sofia joined him, resting her head gently on his shoulder. "She did more than heal Daniel," Sofia said softly. "She healed us too." He nodded. "Yes. She reminded me what love looks like." The sun began to set, casting golden light through the windows of the new institute. Elena stood near the doorway, holding Daniel's hand as they watched the children laugh and play. The sound of happiness filled the air, the kind of sound that money could never buy. Years later, the Elena Miguel Institute became known across the country. Families traveled from far and near, hoping to learn from the woman who once worked as a maid but changed the world with her compassion. Her simple, homemade therapy tools were studied by doctors, her story taught in universities, and her name became a symbol of hope. Daniel grew up healthy and strong, walking, running, and one day speaking before thousands about inclusion and kindness. He always ended his speech with the same line: "Miracles don't come from wealth, they come from the heart." Ricardo never forgot those words. He kept Elena's first notebook, the one filled with Daniel's progress, framed in his office as a reminder that true wealth isn't counted in money, but in lives touched by love. And whenever people asked how he became a different man, he always smiled and said, "Because one woman I almost ignored taught me how to see again." The mansion that once held silence now held life. The laughter of children, the footsteps of hope, and the spirit of a maid who refused to give up filled its walls forever. The story of Ricardo, Daniel, and Elena became a living proof that compassion can heal where power cannot, and that sometimes the people the world overlooks are the ones sent to change it. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that miracles don't always come from the rich or the powerful. They come from the hearts of those who care when no one else does. A woman the world called just a maid became the answer to a billionaire's silent prayer, proving that compassion is stronger than money and love can heal what pride once broke. If this story touched your heart, please don't leave without showing love. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another powerful story like this. Comment below where you're watching from, and tell us your favorite moment from Elena's journey. Remember, kindness costs nothing, but it changes everything. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.